So, if you'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. To the inhabitants of the town of Plymouth in the county of Grafton, the state of New Hampshire, qualified to vote in town affairs, you're hereby notified to meet at the Plymouth Area High School on said Plymouth on Wednesday, the 31st of January, 19 for the deliberative session of the town meeting, at which time action will be taken upon the following warrant article. Article 1, Community Bill of Rights Ordinance, or a Community Rights-Based Ordinance. See if the town will vote to establish a Community Bill of Rights Ordinance, also known as the Community Rights-Based Ordinance, for the people of Plymouth, which prohibits activities and projects that would violate the Bill of Rights, and which provides for enforcement of the Bill of Rights against corporations and governments engaged in those activities and projects. Can I have a motion?
All right, it's really,
Move as read.
it's getting a lot of interference
Read
here.
and seconded. Moved
Something.
and seconded. And I'm ready to open it for discussion. Mr. Hayes, please use the microphone out front.
That's probably like putting the whole thing here.
I thought I would take this opportunity to do a couple of things. First of all, I think it's very appropriate that we say thank you. The other thing that I think is very important is that you have a little bit of background as to why a community rights-based ordinance. So I know the last thing you want is to listen to a talking head, but I did prepare some comments because I think it will give a little backdrop to why we think this is important, and hopefully to also generate in you some questions so that when you have this opportunity to vote this evening, that you can inform vote. So bear with me.
This thing?
No, just switch to like zooming into it.
Yeah.
We're here because
Yeah.
the select board and the CCP
I mean,
believe Plymouth deserves to be constitutionally empowered with the authority to enact local laws that protect the rights of people, our communities, and our natural environments. So what you have in your hand also talks about natural environments. We believe that matters of health, safety, and welfare, and that of Plymouth's natural environments are best understood and managed at the local level by us. Today, if we choose to do nothing, Plymouth is realistically faced with the tragic prospects of losing Main Street businesses, altering our vibrant Main Street culture, disrupting critical emergency routes, destroying some of our aesthetics, university recruitment faltering, property values plummeting, tax revenues not being collected, increased expenses of repairs associated with workarounds of northern passive installation, and more. This rights-based ordinance
I don't understand what the line is.
not just about Northern
No.
Pass.
It's back.
The RVO in your
I mean,
hands
yeah,
is
it's
designed to
on.
proactively
Oh, there you go.
protect us well into the
Yeah.
future from all sorts
How's the audio good?
Yeah, it's all
You
right.
may know that Massachusetts requested a
Yeah.
proposal
Yeah.
to deliver energy to the state of Massachusetts received 46 bids.
Okay.
Northern Pass was only one of those 46 bids. Eversource, the funder of Northern Pass, served on the request for proposal evaluation team that evaluated those 46 applications. And no surprise, it was awarded to Northern Pass last week. No surprise, but clearly a gross conflict of interest and corrupt, and represents obvious, glaring evidence of the need for local self-governance. So the question before us is, how do we legitimately and effectively object, have our voices heard, and protect ourselves from long-term and irreparable harm? What you have witnessed over the past 7.5 years is what so many people have done all across the state, and that is adhere to the sanctioned regulatory process. We've all engaged in the regulatory process. All across New Hampshire, and in shining fashion right here in Plymouth, we have opposed the project civilly and obediently, using that prescribed regulatory process through signs, lots of orange rallies, press conferences, select board sponsored hearings right here in this room, press conferences, letters to editors, hands around the State House, appeals, challenges. Writing and speaking at the SEC hearings. And over 95% of all of the testimony presented to the site evaluation committee was in staunch opposition. Over 95% was opposed. But here's the reality. In spite of all that hard work, all that dedication, all that emotion, we may still get the project anyway. Why? And this is what's important. Why? Because the original intent of our federal and state constitutions that grant us our inalienable rights, those rights that cannot be taken away from us,
So, I guess
has
this
been
one right
incrementally
here
and
is
systematically modified by statutory laws and regulatory rules enacted by legislative leaders who have been significantly influenced by corporate lobbyists. In essence, those added statutes and regulations have cleverly stripped communities of local control over our ability to protect our health safety.
Tell me to come up here and give you this matter.
And here's how.
Could you have a charger?
Yeah.
This is perhaps the most important thing to understand about why we're here and what we're trying to do. Legislators did so by granting personhood rights to large corporations that actually give higher privilege to those corporations than to humans, than to you and me. What we have now is corporations, which are merely property, not persons, being treated by courts as persons, with constitutional protections
Enjoy.
used to subordinate the rights of human beings, except, of course, for those few owners who line their pockets. So the real question is, why do legal fictions, wealth on paper known as corporations, why do those fictions have more rights in Plymouth than we, the real people? Yesterday, SEC, the Site Evaluation Committee, that will determine the fate of our Main Street, began its deliberative process, evaluating the thousands of pages of opposition. Last page.
And it is instructive to understand two things about SEC. This is not a condemnation, it's just reality. First, their job is to issue permits to applicants, such as Northern Pass, who meet the regulatory requirements, the very rules written and recommended by corporate lobbyists wielding vast sums of influential money. So if Northern Pass crosses all their T's and dots all their I's, there's a good chance SEC will issue them a permit. The second thing to understand about SEC is that SEC in its entire history has never denied a permit. Never in its entire history. So this is what we're facing. And those are the reasons we need a new tool that truly serves the people. Who among us can argue that a correction in our way of governing isn't necessary, when the rights of people are subordinate to the rights of private, for-profit corporations, and those corporations routinely foist those privileges in ways that harm local environments, economies, and our welfare, then it is incumbent upon us to do our civic duty and invoke restorative justice to broken law. Our select board and the concerned citizens of Plymouth bring the rights-based ordinance forward for your consideration because, after study, we believe it is the best way to do that. A Bill of Rights for Plymouth, a tool to assert our local governing right, again an inalienable right guaranteed by our New Hampshire State Constitution, and our next best shot at banning Northern Pass, although again, this is bigger than Northern Pass. An RBO allows us to elevate your rights as residents, as human beings, above the claimed rights of corporations and no longer the other way around. Another way of saying it is an RBO will allow us to restore democracy. So with that, you've heard enough from me. I want to introduce one other person, Michelle Sanborn. Michelle is the director of NHCRN, the New Hampshire Community Rights Network, and also works very closely with CELDEF, an organization out of Pennsylvania, which is the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. Michelle, and Michelle is right here if you kind of raise your hand. Michelle has been enormously helpful to the board and to us, and so has CELDEF, the organization she works with, in writing the RBO that you have before you. Michelle is not a resident of Plymouth, Alexandria. So she is an expert on the RBO, and so if any of the members of the board or the CCP cannot respond to questions, I may ask Mr. Clay, our moderator, to see if you would be willing to allow Michelle to speak, to respond to some of your questions, because I think you deserve to have them answered and adequately, so you feel confident in how you will choose to vote tonight.
Further discussion? Use the microphone, please.
I'm Janice Moorhead, I live on North Harvard Street. I keep hearing corporations in this, and we just went through our tax problems here in town, and it's come out that so many of our properties are non-profit. We don't collect taxes. Can this do anything to help us stop the college from expanding to the state entity, or more non-profits coming in and taking over? I mean, is affecting our rights and our way of living when we can't get taxes out of it.
Any other discussion? You're kidding. You ready to vote right now? Mr. Ahern. Go ahead, Viking. Mr. Ahern, you'll be right after him.
This is much more of a question, and I really struggle with Northern Pass. I really struggle with Viking Hedberg, 18 Emerson Street, and I struggle with Citizens United, and also how our elections actually take place. They're more marketing than thoughtful. But I'm wondering the legal status of such a decision, and I also struggle with how do you divvy up from federal to states and now back down to city-states, like Germany, 1848, of a joint decision, unfortunately, and because you clearly stated it's engaged in obviously straightforward, actually very proper decision. And I'm just wondering if other folks who are more knowledgeable on this can address those questions.
There's somebody that can answer his questions? Go ahead, Dick. I'll give you a chance.
I'm not an attorney. No, I can't. But let me see if I can rephrase at least part of the question. How do we go from constitutional law to this issue of regulatory and statutory? Where do we fit in? Where does this RBO fit within that? We have guarantees under the Constitution, both federal and state, and those are the inalienable rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. The ability to self-govern, which is protected in the New Hampshire State Constitution as well. Our rights to do that are protected. We have the right to protect our health, safety, and welfare. The regulatory court of law that we're in now is sort of stripped from conversation the constitutional rights that we have as citizens. So in other words, these amendments that are made and these statutes that are added to constitutional law and the regulations that are added, that's where that's where government has allowed and named personhood to corporation. So that's a regulatory court. What we're trying to do here is change the conversation so that if we were to adopt this tonight, and let's say SEC chooses to go ahead and grant the permit anyway, and bulldozers are about to show up on Main Street, and we issue a cease and desist, and we're forced into a decision about whether we want to challenge that. And hopefully we would challenge that. And let me say why. Think about the culture we have in Plymouth. Just think about our Main Street. What would happen if we didn't have dressers, or we didn't have the monkey, or we didn't have Plymouth Furniture, or the Bistro, or the Chase Street Market, or Cafe Montiel? Which one, David? Well, Steve Grant kicked him from behind. Yeah, I spend more there than any of those other places. So what is it we want to protect? Do you want to go down to M&M Scoops? Do you want to meet your friends? Do you want to have an environment that enriches the quality of life that we have here in Plymouth? Or do we want to allow the conversation to remain in a regulatory court of law where corporations have higher privilege than you and I have? Or do we want to enforce our constitutional rights and put it in a different conversation in law, in constitutional law. That's what this does. It restores what we already have. It changes the conversation. We want to protect. And we have the right to do that if we put the conversation back in constitutional law. That's what this does. I don't know if I didn't answer. Yeah.
I'm still confused on the question too, so.
I guess if we put it to the most simple question, what is we? Is we Plymouth? Is we 18 Emerson Street? Or is we the state?
Well, if it's going to cost any money, it's 18 Emerson Street. Plymouth is a corporation. So it's Plymouth. And the board, the select board would have a choice if we come, push comes to shove and we need to decide whether we wish to enforce and issue a cease and desist to Northern Pass and ask our police to go out there and pound vehicles and so on. We is also any citizen in Plymouth. It is the CCP. As a matter of fact, 5 of us who are members of the Concerned Citizens of Plymouth are incorporated so that we protect ourselves if we get sued. So, yeah, there are risks. And yes, we as any individual who's a resident of Plymouth, any group of individuals, the corporation, the CCP, anyone, if some corporation is granted a permit to come here to do what is now known as legal damage. Does that answer? Sort of. Okay. And literally anyone, if we adopt it, any citizen who's a resident of Plymouth can choose to enforce the law if there is harm being done by a corporation.
Mr. Ahern.
Okay, I want to start. I'm Henry Ahern from Plymouth, New Hampshire. I live down on Route 3, south of Plymouth. I own the deer farm, and I am kind of in a unique thing because not only are they going to dig up the road in front of my house and my business, but they're going to put a tower just south of my property and a big converter station. So I sympathize and I agree, and I have been to SEC hearings, I've picketed on the Common, I've been very much against Northern Pass from day one. However, that said, I have some concerns with this ordinance. I own a farm, okay? With this ordinance, the town of Plymouth could say, I cannot spread fertilizer on my fields. I have people shaking their heads no, but fertilizer in a lot of instances could be declared a toxic substance. Okay? I could be told that I could not use certain seeds to plant on my fields. I could be told that there are certain things that I cannot do with my land with this ordinance. And that's why I have concerns about this ordinance. And I have real mixed emotions about passing it. So there are other rules when I start doing this, and I'm involved right now with legislation and Farm Bureau in the state Senate or the state House over whether towns can set regulations different than the states on the fertilizer we use. Whether they can set, each individual town can set a rule on the seeds that we can use. And if you think about it, a lot of farms have property in multiple towns. Can you imagine if I wanted to go out and spread fertilizer on my fields and I got a different rule in every single town that I have to work with? So that's just why I have concerns. And what I would like to oppose, and I don't know whether we can amend this or not, but I would like to make a motion that we amend this article to sunset in 8 years. Propose that as amendment.
Second to the amendment? Okay, there's a second to the amendment.
I didn't know it.
Hang on. No, hang on. Did you petition the court for this? No, this can be amended. This can be amended. It's been moved and seconded to amend it to sunset in 8 years. Sunset in 8 years means is that it goes away in 8 years. Unless you come back and vote it back in. Questions, discussion? Yeah.
And the question be answered so that voters can decide what's informed and what answer.
I'm going to open it to discussion. I just needed the rule on the ability to put that amendment on, and that's what I just did. So now I'm opening it up to discussion on amending it to sunset in 8 years. Is there discussion from somebody who has not already had a chance to speak? Please, go to the microphone. If I don't notice you, just go to the microphone and stand there, and I will see you.
Chris Woods, 157 Fairgrounds. I didn't expect to be discussing this in particular because actually I want to go on to several other things, but I'll try and stick to this particular topic. I'm probably one of the few people in the room who share Mr. Ahern's concerns as somebody who's also involved in agriculture. However, I'd rather see the amendment here be something along the lines to exclude specifically agricultural land use. I think that would get more to the heart of the matter.
Okay, that's fine. If that didn't answer, okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Hayes.
I think this will answer both questions. The second speaker, the agricultural land use is already excluded. Let me draw your attention, if you will look on page 5, under prohibitions, on section 4, prohibitions, and you look at B, it says it shall be unlawful within Plymouth or any corporation or government to engage in toxic waste disposal as defined by this ordinance. So it has to apply to the prohibitions for one thing, and then we'll get into definitions. But notice in this definition, it doesn't talk about farmers. Okay, they're not even addressed in this, so it's not a prohibition for a farmer. Then if you flip to page 3, under definitions, section 2, item C, it defines toxic waste disposal for the purposes of this ordinance includes, but is not limited to, physical deposition of toxic waste onto land and into waters within Plymouth. And if you look at D, toxic waste for the purpose of this ordinance includes, but is not limited to, waste products from petroleum refining, coal combustion wastes, sediment sludge, heavy metals, chemical residue from manufacturing processes, mining residuals, radioactive waste, or any other waste material that poses a present or potential hazard to human health or ecosystems. So the combination of prohibitions and definitions makes clear that we're trying to protect farmers, not attack farmers.
Okay, so now I want to talk about the amendment about limiting it so that it ends in 8 years, and that's what I would like the discussion on. Go ahead, Mrs. Knight.
Okay, my concern with that sunset in 8 years, I was at the SEC hearing this morning until 2 o'clock. One of the big concerns they've discussed was about the master plans of the towns they've been reviewing and how many towns, number one, didn't either have them or weren't addressing issues in the future. Plymouth has a history with Northern Pass, known as Hydro-Quebec, already. They have came to us back in 2005, 2006. We told them no. They come back again 2 years ago when we had another open meeting. The sunsetting would, in essence, unless there's a specific provision to revisit, rejuvenate, and discuss and go further in the future, would be one of the things that it would be concerned about. We can't let this go away. We don't know what kind of next peril is coming through. This is only one peril right now. What's the next peril coming through? We need to address all future activity. And we need to make sure it doesn't go away, at least the body of the ordinance. So that's my concern with that. What's that? Anyway.
Mr. Rand.
Mr. Moderator, so I'm Steve Rand. I'm very much in favor of this ordinance. I have a couple of things. One is there would be no reason why our town could not repeal this ordinance if we so choose. That doesn't put a timeline on it. I think we will find out soon, most likely, whether or not this serves our needs. The other thing is that we're really talking about rights and about constitutional rights. The rights that we have are timeless. At least I hope so. And our Constitution isn't going to be changed. Bill of Rights isn't going to be changed. I think what we're looking for here is to clarify what our local rights are vis-a-vis state, federal rights, as such as they are. We're in a binary place right now because we are the child of the state. The state says you can do this, you can do this, you can't do that, and basically anything they don't say we can do, we can't. But yet, our Constitution gives us the right to guard our own health, safety, and welfare, and to be free men, and to be the people who we started as a country. We started as local towns, being mostly with local government. When our nation was born, we were a collection of small towns with town meetings just like this one, and people were governing their own local matters. Now we have superimposed on us these collections of things. So with respect to the amendment, I think we should not pass this amendment so that we can send a specific message that I'll talk about later to our state government on how they're going to support us in doing this.
Any more discussion on the amendment? Okay, you don't need to. I'm going to do it right now anyways. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, if you are a registered voter in the town of Plymouth, you have one of these, okay? So, all those in favor of the amendment, hold it up high. All of those opposed, hold it up high. It is obvious that motion fails, which brings us back to the main article. We have more discussion on the main article. Mr. Miller.
Miller, 54 Western Road. I have here a copy of our New Hampshire Constitution of 1784, which is 5 years before the federal Constitution of 1789. If those people that have a copy of this, is Article 7, which is the state sovereignty. And this is a statement of the people of this state have the sole and exclusive right of governing themselves as a free, sovereign, and independent state. This message was to the federal government, Congress. This article tonight is about people of the town of Plymouth having a sole and exclusive right of self-governing as a free, sovereign, and independent town. That's what we're voting on. Free, sovereign, and independent town. That's why you have to be a registered voter to have certain things like land use permits and other things that affect our quiet enjoyment of our resources as we would like to see them, as we would like to be able to determine the use of. So this is a function of self-determination as to who we are going to be in the town of Plymouth. Thank you.
Mr. Moorhead.
Dave Moorhead, 9 Hawthorne Street. I asked a question the other night in the meeting at the town hall, and I'm still kind of confused. Has every word been embedded in here by a lawyer so that we know that if the word is really the word is, or is mitigation really the word mitigation, or are we going to be getting into a gigantic lawsuit like we just went through because of a cornfield? I believe me, I'm in favor of keeping the northern pass out. I don't want to see our town torn to pieces, and that's what's going to happen. And it could take 2 years for them to get through our town with all the understructure underneath that road and the concrete they're going to have to tear up. It could be a very big nightmare. And there's some businesses downtown that couldn't handle that. And but I just want to make sure that the words in here aren't going to go wind up in the Supreme Court of the state of New Hampshire and they tell you to go fly a kite, and the state legislature can't say this isn't anything, we're not going to even abide by it and listen to you. Because I know that the governor of the state is in favor of this cheaper power coming down through because he wants cheap power for Waterville Valley. And I am very much in favor, though, of trying to somehow stop this northern pass from coming right through the middle of our town.
Does anybody have an answer for him? You know, it's like the old story of the old country lawyer. The old country lawyer was in town, and he was the only one in town, and he was starving to death, and another lawyer moved in, and they both became wealthy. So as long as something's written on paper, people can argue one way or the other, so.
Mr. Moderator, thank you for your indulgence. So here's something that you should know, because what David brings up is the question of whether or not we're going to get sued and whether or not, whether the state's going to be okay with this, and that gets back to the parent-child thing that I was talking about before. So concurrently with this passage of this ordinance today, I am one of six sponsors of a constitutional amendment that is going to be heard in the State House, not in the State House, but in the Legislative Office Building next week, that proposes to present a constitutional amendment to the people of New Hampshire that would clarify that these types of ordinances are, in fact, not only okay, but desirable. So the reason that we need to do that is because the language in the Constitution, though it seems clear to all, is not exactly, it is arguable. So there are plenty of legal arguments as to why this thing shouldn't be allowed to happen. And it is likely that if we actually take action under this ordinance, that we will in fact be sued. A state constitutional amendment would provide an umbrella over this ordinance that would show it to be immune from legal challenge and prevent it from being there. So this is a chicken or the egg situation in some ways, because here we are considering passing an ordinance, local ordinance, that doesn't have a specific state constitutional article that covers it, only has to be covered by precedent and by the general ideas expressed in the Constitution of Bill of Rights. So there's room for plenty of argument there. So I will be working on what's called CARC, Constitutional Concurrent Resolution, which it needs to pass the House and the Senate by a 3/5 majority, and then it will come onto your ballot, hopefully, in November, for the people of the state of New Hampshire to pass. Let's put it plainly. This is a revolutionary idea. It's revolutionary because it changes the balance of power. Our Constitution says that if our government isn't serving our needs, then we have the right of revolution. We not only have the right of revolution, but we have the duty of revolution. So this is a kind of a revolution that we are fomenting here, because the actual practice of today is that that corporations have more rights than we do as a municipality. So that corporations are on an equal level with the state in terms of their powers, and all the civil rights that they have are the same as persons. And the rights of persons are protected by the U.S. and the state law. So they are actually aside from having more money, they also have more legal status than we do as a town. So I'm trying to say that the town is puny, but in the eyes of the law, we are a little bit puny. I'm sorry. So we are asserting ourselves, and that's what we're doing here. And we'll put this question to the voters of the state of New Hampshire and ask them, where are laws best made that protect the citizens of the state? Are the laws best made in the local communities where the most affected people are living, or are they made in higher places? Well, you know as well as I do that when we hear our state legislators talk about, well, we need more state control. We need more state control. What that's all about is bringing the control back to the level that's closer to the people. We're talking about bringing the control back to the municipality, to the town of Plymouth in this case, as the right thing to do to give us the best way to adapt our laws to our needs, and to make sure that we have protection from unwanted threats to our health, welfare, and safety. I'm not sure. I think I answered some part of that.
Mrs. Hedberg.
Hi, Katie Hedberg, 18 Emerson Street. Just following up a little on what Mr. Moore had said, but I also love town. I'm not in favor of Northern Pass. We don't want our town ripped up, and I frequent all of the businesses on our main street, and they're the heart of our town. I do have some concerns about unintended consequences, and I think that that's some of the things that Mr. Moorhead was addressing. If we look at things in the lens of today, we may understand what unsustainable energy is, but our lens may be different a few years from now. And I also really have, one part I have a lot of concerns about is the definitions of exploratory data collection. I think that that can be positive, it's not always a negative. And if we start prohibiting things that can be of good use to us, we don't know what those, as I said, unintended consequences are. So I don't want Northern Pass to dig up our town. I want all of our businesses to succeed. But I do think we need to consider unintended consequences.
Mr. Ahern.
The unintended consequences is great because that's what I had in my mind when I walked in the door up there and I forgot about it. So, and just to clarify, in our definition of toxic waste, we have at the very end, the last sentence says, or any other waste material that possesses a present or potential hazard to human health or ecosystem. Who determines what the potential hazard is? There's a lot of controversy. I have in the past used biosolids on my fields here in Plymouth. Okay? Biosolids to some towns is a hazardous waste. To other towns it's not. I think it's a great fertilizer and it has caused no problems. You just have to determine where it comes from and be aware of what's in it. Okay? But the other thing that could come up back to bite us is there's nothing in here that says that a committee of 10 people or 15 people couldn't get together in the town of Plymouth and say, you no longer can have guns in the town of Plymouth. Okay? So these are the unintended consequences that this bill, or this warrant article, could possibly pose. And I'm sure there are others. Those are ones that have come to mind. Thank you.
Is there any more discussion? Are you ready for the question? All right. Is there a preference? Do you want to have secret ballot or do you want to just vote? Okay, I heard a request for secret ballot, so we will have a secret ballot. Everybody got a ballot when they came in that says yes and no. I want you to see, because I'm going to show you that the ballot box is empty. I will lock the ballot box. I wish you to put in the vote you wish to cast. Yes if you are in favor, no if you're opposed. And then as quickly as we can after, we will get the results to you. Okay? The ballot box is empty. What? Come over here and I'll tap you. The ballot box is locked. I declare the polls open. You may come and cast your ballot. you haven't voted, you're gonna lose your chance. Supervisors, you coming down to vote? Last call. Oh, yeah. It was a great conversation you were having. Now, I know, you have to catch up with everybody when you come to these meetings, I understand. All right, anybody wishing to vote who has not already done so? I declare the polls closed. We'll count the ballots.
It's going pretty quick. Oh yeah, it's one of the selectmen just, yeah. So, no. Here.
Usually the AC isn't kick on.
Who do you think's gonna win?
I don't know what we're voting on.
You know?
Kind of. What?
Do you live here?
No, I don't.
Oh.
I get that they don't want Northern Pass to go through Main Street.
Yeah. It
But the other thing kind of threw me off, the farming thing.
Yeah, that is interesting, but I think when it gets down to it, somebody has to have rights. So it's either the corporation or the towns.
Right.
I mean, it's like who's gonna win, well.
And I get the concern that if we do challenge the corporation, that we could be sued. I just don't, what I don't know is how much of the conversation that happened today as a whole with what was going on right now. Is it just whether or not we challenge the corporation?
No, so
Okay, the results of your vote. I'm gonna make it wait a minute. There were 151 ballots cast, 132 in favor and 19 opposed. The article passes. We will have to entertain a motion to adjourn. We stand. Hold it.
I move that we restrict consideration on the amendment of the...
Moved and seconded to restrict consideration on the amendment. What that means is it can't come up again unless we have another meeting. If I had adjourned, it wouldn't have made any difference, but that's okay if you feel better about it. All of those for restricting consideration signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary-minded nay. Vote in the affirmative and I so declare it. Now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out tonight.